It's the first time that the Press Club has held anything like this, and it's the first time we have celebrated the holy month of Ramadan. Without further ado, I will ask Mr. Day to come and speak to us.
Thank you, my friend, and thank you, my friends. On behalf of our Prime Minister, let me first say to you, Ramadan Mubarak. And sitting with the ambassador from Indonesia, and congratulations on the election to the Security Council. This is wonderful. And that was achieved on the first ballot. To me, invigorating to be able to draw from the experience, the lessons in life, and not only the challenges, but the victories and the things that you've achieved. And we can draw on that as we work together, as sitting there not just with the ambassador from Indonesia, but with the High Commissioner from Bangladesh, and to think that it was Professor Yunus from their good country who achieved the Nobel Prize for his work in microcredit. Fantastic. That around us we have those from which we can draw encouragement and energy and strength, and also advice. And sometimes advice is those are the things we like to hear. Sometimes the advice is not easy to take, but it's important that we do that. And in the context of the United Nations, as we think about what's been taking place today, and as we think about some of the challenges that we face, especially some of those that have evolved just over the last few days, it really makes us realize what we have here in Canada. And I was visiting not too long ago in my office from someone from whose country has never known democracy, has never known freedom. And he is a person who's working for that and wants to see that day come for the first time in history where his country can experience that. And he was interested to hear, and sometimes when we think in Canada, for instance, about something like an election, I was explaining to this person how it was really a remarkable thing that takes place when an election happens in Canada. I'm not making this as a partisan statement, but when you think that that a federal party was moved out of power and another party moved in and not one shot was fired. Well, okay, some personal shots were fired, but not one shot was fired. There were no riots in the street. I know there were people upset and there were people who were heartbroken, because in all elections there are people who win and people who lose. But what a remarkable thing when you take that back over the history of humankind. Go back hundreds, go back thousands of years. It's a very tiny percentage of time in that whole continuum that we've been able to see this, really what is still an experiment of changing of power without violence and without bloodshed. And it is the example, it's an example of what Canada can lead by example. And in this room, among many of you with whose hands I have already shaken, there are times when we disagree on things, there are times when we agree on things, but isn't it wonderful to be able to disagree without fear? To be able to vote for whomever we like without fear. And to be able to speak on whatever topic we like without fear of personal injury or loss. This is what we have to share with the rest of the world. The fact that we can be together, share values, share differences, and show how to work those out. The world really needs that type of an example in such a day as we have here. There's different political parties represented here. There's 2 senators here, there may be more. I'm just looking at the 2 that I was across from, both whom I count as dear friends and counselors and advisors. And yet I know they don't agree on absolutely everything. And nor do we, but we 90%. I'm writing that down. 90%. But I want to thank each one of you, just as I've used the examples of our friend from Indonesia, Bangladesh, Iraq, each bringing not just to the table, but to our country some rich experience that if we can draw from, our country will become stronger, and as people look to us as an example, the world can actually be a little better place. Thank you so much for being a part of that.
Very quickly, His Excellency Mohammed Tanji, the Moroccan ambassador of Canada and Dean of the Arab Diplomatic Corps, is going to say a few words.
I have had the honor and privilege of meeting you in churches, in synagogues, and I am not surprised tonight to have you celebrate with us the month of Ramadan, the holy month of Muslims. You spoke about Indonesia and about Bangladesh for their achievements, and you are seeking advice. And I would like to share with you very briefly, because I know you are leaving for another commitment. So I would like to thank you for being with us tonight, on behalf of my colleagues, the ambassadors and high commissioners of Muslim countries. And I would like, first of all, also to express our heartfelt appreciation to the National Press Club of Canada, and in particular to its president, Mr. Spencer Moore, for organizing this iftar to celebrate the holy month of Ramadan. This is the first time, as far as I know, that such an initiative is taken by the National Press Club. I sincerely hope that it will be followed by many similar initiatives that will contribute to a better understanding and knowledge of the Muslim world at large and of the growing Muslim community of Canada in particular. I strongly believe that better knowledge and understanding of the true Muslim faith, as well as the other religions, will undoubtedly lead to mutual respect and consideration, and will also serve as a strong basis for forging an objective alliance among these religions to combat all the extremists who are working very hard today to ignite tensions, confrontations between and within religions, value systems, and ways of life. Mesdames et messieurs, grâce au Cercle national des journalistes du Canada, nous célébrons ensemble ce soir le mois sacré du Ramadan. Ce mois est sacré à cause des riches enseignements qu'il apporte aux musulmans, mais aussi et surtout du fait que c'est aussi le mois de la communication du Coran, le livre céleste qui sert de référence à la foi musulmane. Une lecture honnête et intelligente de ce livre nous révèle clairement que l'islam est une religion de paix, de solidarité, d'ouverture et de dialogue. Je dirais même que fondamentalement, c'est une religion de l'amour d'autrui. Ladies and gentlemen, to substantiate and illustrate what I have just stated, let me refer just to a few teachings of the Quran. Among the teachings of this holy book, and those derived from its prophet Muhammad's are, for instance, that a Muslim is not a true Muslim until he wishes to his brothers and sisters what he wishes for himself. That a true Muslim is the one who does not hurt others with his words or with his acts. That the Muslim Ummah or nation is a moderate one among the people of the world. Naturally, these teachings are found in different wording in other holy books. Therefore, it should not be a surprise to all of you who are not of Muslim faith when you read verse 68 of Al-Ma'idah in the Quran, which says that people of the holy books, meaning the Jews and the Christians, are not on the right path until they act in accordance with the Torah and the Bible. Dear friends, the point I am trying to make tonight is that the great religions of mankind, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, as well as other great systems of belief and values from around the world teach us similar value systems which might differ only on the surface. Accordingly, it seems to me that in order to build a better world, a world of security, peace and prosperity for all, we must always look for what we have in common and what can bring us together. Les différences qui peuvent exister entre nous doivent être perçues comme une source d'enrichissement et ne doivent en aucun cas justifier des confrontations. C'est donc, Monsieur le Ministre, sur une note d'espoir, de dialogue, de compréhension et de solidarité entre les religions et les systèmes de valeurs, et surtout d'union face aux extrémismes qui nous menacent tous, que je voudrais conclure mon intervention. Merci encore une fois, Monsieur le Ministre, d'être avec nous ce soir, malgré votre agenda très chargé et vos engagements. Merci au Cercle national des journalistes de nous recevoir avec autant de générosité. Merci à toutes les personnalités ici présentes. Merci de votre aimable attention.
Thank you. Excellent.
Merci beaucoup.
Ernie Tannis, who's going to talk about Who is My Neighbor? Resolving Disputes in a Global Neighborhood. Now, Ernie has been a lawyer for 30 years. He's received his BA at Carleton and a common law degree at University of Ottawa. He has been involved in alternative dispute resolution for over 20 years. He's written books on the subject, and he co-hosts a radio show on alternative dispute resolution. Ernie, after several other speakers, etc., at last you're on. Thank you very much, Ernie.
Oh, thank you.
Let's move straight into it.
Thank you very much. I was talking to someone. The book launch was in this room. It really brought back good memories. Thank you. I was asked by Eid, thank you very much, Eid, to speak. I said, on what theme? He said, well, make it fit Ramadan. And Ramadan Mubarak to everyone. My beautiful wife, too, and my daughter Shander's here. I thought of who is my neighbor? And the world is just one big neighborhood. And I was thinking of the word neighbor as my Dean of Law would say, it's an illuminating glimpse into the obvious. But who is my neighbor, you would remember, is the question the lawyer put to Jesus when he was asked, how do I get into eternal paradise? And Jesus said, love thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind, all thy soul. I got priests here to correct me. But he said, love thy neighbor as thyself. And then the lawyer said, well, who is my neighbor? Now, Jesus did not define neighbor. He told the story of the Good Samaritan. And that story of the Good Samaritan found its way into a 1932 case in the House of Lords in England. It's a case called Donahue and Stevenson. It's the first time in common law history throughout the Commonwealth that a manufacturer was held liable to a consumer because the consumer can only sue the retailer. But Lord Atkins said this about neighbors. The rule that you are to love your neighbor becomes in law, you must not injure your neighbor. You must take reasonable care, his lordship said, to avoid acts or omissions which you can reasonably foresee would be likely to injure your neighbor. Then who in law is my neighbor? The answer seems to be persons who are so closely and directly affected by my act that I ought reasonably to have them in contemplation as being so affected when I am directing my mind to the acts and omissions which are called in question. And then it occurred to me then, who in life is our neighbor? And when we look at each other and we cross nationalities and forget about stereotypes and genealogy and gender and geography and color of skin, we are, in the human species, neighbors. We are all neighbors. We all can have nasty neighbors too. The prophet had a neighbor who kept dropping garbage on his property. And one day, there was no garbage dropped on his property. So the prophet went over to see if he was okay. And he went over and said, you didn't drop garbage on my property, is everything okay? And he showed care for the neighbor. I thought, isn't that a wonderful story, that even when you're being dumped on by your neighbor, you should love your neighbor. And we need to get back to basics. Now, one thing I learned in Akwesasne in their mediation program was one of their elders said, every culture is like a flower, and one day the world should be a beautiful bouquet. So it's not dominion over the world that I think the Bible meant. It was nurturing the world. It was to help one another. It was to be stewards of the world. And I looked in terms of the Abrahamic religions, because lots of friends in all the religions, including good atheist friends who Father Gatas met the other day when he did a beautiful service for my mother, may peace be upon her, who passed away last week. And it really is humbling to see the equalizer. Because as we cross through this life, I think we think to ourselves, how well were we loved? But when we cross to the afterlife, what do we remember? We remember, and people remember, how well did we love? This is the only thing that counts in the neighborhood. And in Judaism, I heard that Hillel, the scholar, said, what is hateful to you, do not do unto your neighbor. That is the whole of Jewish law. The rest is commentary. Now go and study. And in the Quran, at Surah 4, verse 36, it says, and worship Allah, show kindness unto parents, unto near kindred, orphans, the needy, unto the neighbor who is both kin to you, and the neighbor who is not of kin. And Ambassador Tenji, when he spoke and wrapped it all up, it really gave richness to this little research I've done. I thank you very much, because it's a beautiful universal teaching. If we can all remember, we are one and all neighbors. We are even neighbors in the grave. We are neighbors everywhere. We are neighbors when we're across the ocean from each other. There was a hadith I read where the prophet was reported to have said, Gabriel has continued to strongly recommend me to be kind to my neighbor, and I thought that he would make him among my heirs. I wrote a book in 1989, and it wasn't the best book in Canada, but it was the first book, Alternative Dispute Resolution That Works. And funny enough, as you take on a life path, I told a story in that book, which turns out to have Islamic origins. I only found that out recently. But in the book, I told this famous story of a military leader where his army went and conquered all sorts of other nations around them. And as they were going back to their homeland, the soldiers were about to celebrate. He said, no, you now must have the greatest battle of all. They said, what bigger battle is there? He said, the battle within. That is what I understand the major jihad is. And the linguistic torture of the word jihad is an abomination and should not be allowed. There was one phrase I think about, and I don't know where it came from, but I asked a head of a library to look it up, and he couldn't find it. So I'm going to say the phrase. If somebody knows the source, tell me. The librarian thought I made it up. I did not. I did the other one about war and peace. But the saying is this: woe be to those who violate the law of God, but woe be to those indeed who violate the law of God in the name of God. And that to me is one of the most important teachings we should keep track of today. And in terms of neighborhood, you know the idea of 6 degrees of separation, that anybody in this room is only 6 people away from anybody else in the world. And if you look at the Google, you'll see that's been mathematically studied. Jeremy right here was doing a film. He's done a series on the economics of conflict on the show. If you know the mathematics, that we're only 6 people away from everybody in the world. So I would like to make one proposal and close with one more short story from Akwesasne, who had their civil war in 1990. Professor Ziegler called that dispute the Middle East of North America. I'm very honored that my father was from Ishki. I was born in Canada. My Jidda was a great Orthodox priest. And Father Gatas, thank you for mentioning him at the funeral. And he's from Damascus, Syria. I honor that heritage, and I very much, as the minister said, am proud and happy to be a Canadian citizen, because we are global citizens first, and then we bring our cultures to bear. I would like to think that we could have a cry of the universe is for this peace. It's a universal cry, UniCry. UniCry can stand for United Nations International Conflict Resolution Year. Why doesn't the United Nations declare an International Conflict Resolution Year? ADR is now growing all over the world. More things are done through treaties and negotiation, and every member of the human family can participate in that program, as Mr. Yunus did with the Grameen Bank. The last story I want to tell you is from Akwesasne again. After the Mohawks did something that every government, all police forces of New York State, Quebec, Ontario, the national government of the United States, the federal government of Canada, the RCMP, the FBI, the CSIS, the CIA, no one thought that that community would put together a mediation center. They took the best of their teachings and ADR, and they did something which is a great model that we should pay attention to. I want to tell a quick story about a neighbor, and it's a story that's well known, but it's worth repeating. And I know it's a good story because Bill Urey, who was the conflict resolution consultant to President Carter to Camp David Accords, who was very helpful to us in our earlier work, ended his speech with this story. It's called the 18th camel story. I understand also of Islamic origin. And you might know the story where a sheikh left his herd of camels to his 3 sons. And he said he leaves 1/2 of his camels to his oldest, 1/3 to his middle son, and 1/9 to his last son. But if you have 17 camels, you can't divide them. You can't do it. So the sons argued, then the wives argued, then the children argued, and the tribe was going to go to war. And somebody said, no, let's go back to what the teachings say. In all the teaching in the Quran, let's mediate this. Well, let's bring in a woman from another tribe. That was a good idea to bring in a woman, right? And she comes in and they said to her, how can we solve this problem? And she said, let me pray about it. So the next day she came with another camel. She said, what are you bringing a camel here for? She said, well, now you have 18 camels in your herd. So the oldest son took his half, which is 9. The middle son took his 1/3, which is 6. The bottom son, the youngest, took his 9th, which is 2, which is 17 camels. And she took her camel back, which was the 18th camel. So I like to believe there's an 18th camel solution in every problem. And the people in this room, the politicians, the senators, the diplomats, as Ambassador MacDonald says, in multi-track diplomacy, will work towards that harmony. Because I've come to believe through 90 radio shows and talking to guests from all over the world that war is good business for the few, but peace is better business for the many. And that's what we should be working towards together. So one thing I learned is never lose your sense of humor, and thank you very much for the honor of speaking to you tonight.
I think there's one person that I think likes to speak about these occasions, and I want Senator Prudhomme. Have you got a few words you want to utter?
Shukran, bonsoir, merci. I don't know, I hope I'm not the 18th camel. I will like to remind you, and it's exact quote. It's very dangerous, you know, to ask me to speak because El Grande Presidente Castro pretends that there's only one man in the world that can speak longer than him. It's Senador Marcel. Because I've known him since '59. First, I like to, again, like our minister, Monsieur Day, congratulate and say bravo to Indonesia for being on the Security Council. And you know, if I was belonging to the non-aligned world, at least with me there's no secret, I would still vote for Venezuela for the last seat. So at least you know where I stand. Merci à Monsieur l'Ambassadeur du Maroc. And Monsieur l'Ambassadeur du Maroc, in his word, and I will only quote, and I'll be very brief, said, quote, I strongly believe that better knowledge and understanding of the true Muslim faith, as well as the other religion, will undoubtedly lead to mutual respect and consideration. So I want to thank those who organized tonight, this evening, to have succeeded in getting Monsieur Day to share an evening with you. Ça, c'est très important. That's my 45 years of agony trying to say organize, 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 organize. Don't complain, organize. Well, at times I'm rough on a friend of all of yours because I like him, because at least he's doing something. So I want to say to Monsieur Mourad, thank you for putting the show on the road. And in the presence of his, the representative of His Holiness, my Pope, as I've done to His Holiness Pope Imagine my age, Pope Pius, Paul VI and Jean-Paul 23rd and Jean-Paul II. I'm a Roman Catholic. Je suis Canadien français jusqu'à la fin de ma vie. Je respecte ma naissance. Alors je dois respecter la naissance des autres. Nous sommes tous un accident de naissance. J'aurais pu être papou, africain, païen, ou j'aurais pu être anglo-saxon, protestant. Peut-être que ma carrière politique à Ottawa aurait été mieux. Mais enfin, ce qui est important, c'est que vous ayez réussi à vous réunir autour de la même table pour célébrer, to celebrate people of different faith, people of different political party, people of different country. So I'm enjoying every minute of finishing my day with you all because I love you all. I don't say I like you all, I love you all.
We thank you very much for coming. We hope we'll have more next year in Ramadan. And we hope you will all come back as well.